Hi, everybody. This is Slava Kurylak at Produvia, and I am super excited to interview Vijay Krishnan. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing your name right. One of the founders at Turing. I'm super excited to interview Vijay, and he has wealth of experience to share with you and our audience who are interested to learn about how you can leverage the latest modern technologies to solve human resources and recruiting type problems. I will introduce Vijay briefly, and hopefully Vijay will fill the gap. So Vijay has a wealth of experience. He is the CTO at Turing, and he comes with a diverse background of different types of he has worked with different companies and has solved many problems. He has a wealth of data science experience. He has a wealth of machine learning experience, and I am excited to bring him on. And a little bit more about Turing. Turing is a company that helps other organizations to fill the market gap of finding global talent, to find talent that is not just of high quality, but a talent that is able to be with the company for a long time. So I'm excited to bring Vijay on to the live stream. Please welcome Vijay.
Hi, thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, Vijay, for coming on. I really appreciate your time. We will do our best to share with our audience our insights about how companies like how global companies can leverage Turing, how global companies can solve recruiting problems. And let's begin this interview by going over your backgrounds. Like, dive a little bit deeper into who are you and why we are here.
All right. I'm hearing a bit of an echo. Okay, not anymore. Good. Yeah. So well, I have been in the field of machine learning for a long time now. I want to say it's going to be something like 18 years now. So long before I guess it was necessarily cool. I guess I did AI research in my undergraduate days at IIT Bombay, then at Stanford University, and then at Yahoo's machine learning team. At this point, I was largely doing academic research and publishing papers on the applications of AI and machine learning to various problems, mostly to do with the text data and NLP and web search. Later, in my work as a scientist at Yahoo and in the context of starting my previous company that did personalized content recommendations, I applied this to problems in the industry itself in a commercial setting. And of course, my my previous AI company got acquired about 4 years back, and Turing is what I'm running now. Turing is about a little under 3 years old, and Turing uses AI to better match the world's best software developers to US companies that have a talent shortage.
Thank you for that introduction. Turing is definitely one of the companies that has caught my eye because you don't just provide a matching of a huge marketplace where you're helping companies to find their employment and contractual talent, but also you're leveraging technology to help you streamline this matchmaking. So share with us sort of a super high-level overview of how Turing is using technology to perhaps simplify the recruiting process.
Sure. So I guess yeah. So first, maybe let me speak about about Turing's value proposition itself a little bit more clearly, and then I'll talk about various parts and how Turing helps automate them, and how Turing uses both automation and AI toward problems that have traditionally been handled in a very manual manner in the staffing industry or in the recruiting industry. So first, Turing has two main constituents. really. So we on one side we have we have US companies that are quite picky about the quality of engineering talent they wish to hire for various core functions of products and technologies that they wish to build, and are consequently finding it hard to compete with other strong companies locally, since there's just not enough strong talent to go around. Turing solves this problem for them by tapping into the world's pool of talent. Now, for a software developer, that the value proposition is that no matter what part of the world they live in, if they sign up for Turing, take our tests, and go through our process, they may never have to interview for a job again, since Turing will constantly keep matching them to the best job opportunities in the Silicon Valley and the rest of the US. Now, there are many things Turing does today, which has traditionally been done in a very manual manner by the staffing industry. So to make a platform like Turing work well, first one has to solve the problem of sourcing. Today, Turing has more than 200,000 registered software developers from all over the world. So our developers come from something like 10,000 cities around the world in more than 140 countries around the world again. So this is a very, very long tail of talent that we are able to tap into, which I think traditional staffing methods are just not capable of getting that kind of reach. And very often, almost any hiring manager will tell you that often this is where the problem starts. If you just don't have enough candidates even to consider, the odds that you'll find somebody that's very qualified and very suitable for you also dramatically diminish. So solving this top of the funnel talent problem is certainly a great start, and we do it entirely in product. So we don't have recruiters in various countries or anything of that sort. It's all it's all automatic. Then of course, if one solves this talent pipeline problem, then you're faced with a new problem, which is that given any specific job, there are potentially thousands of possible candidates that can be matched to a job. How do you tell who the best few are going to be for a specific job? Now, Turing solves this problem by essentially designing a series of both programming tests, skill tests, as well as a test for soft skills that attempt to gain most of the signal that is normally obtained in an on-site interview in a good Silicon Valley company. So if you got selected to interview at a Google or a Facebook, you would probably go through something like 4 or 5 hours of interviews where you're tested for various things, for raw programming skill, for system design skills, for various other things as well. We attempt to assess most of these things ourselves, except we try to do it as automatically as possible, because that's what will allow this to scale and and serve a much higher set of developers as a result. So in our case, developers go through something like 6 to 10 hours of various tests where they can, in a sense, prove that they have the necessary depth of skills in various areas. So we test for computer science fundamentals, we test for certain skills like front-end fundamentals, back-end fundamentals, machine learning. We test for specific tech stack skills like Node, React, GraphQL, and so on. And we also test for soft skills. So this would be raw English fluency. This would also be, I guess, seniority, in the sense of what is the extent of ownership you're capable of taking. Are you the kind of person that can perform well on tasks that is handed to them, or can you own whole objectives and run with it completely yourself? So we do a lot of assessments of this sort as well. And toward the end of the process, we do involve we do some manual tech screen as well. So in many ways, we end up automating, I would say, 90 or 95% of what a traditional interview process would involve. And because we are collecting this rich data about developers' competencies, that puts us in a position to make much better matches as well. And today we have an extremely high NPS on both the developer as well as on the customer side. I believe we landed with something between 8.5 and 9 out of 10 on both the customer side as well as on the developer side, on the metric of would you recommend this to a friend? Would you recommend Turing to a friend? Yeah, and most of them went, I mean, the 10 is the highest and 1 is the lowest. Yeah, people got extremely close to the 10 end of the scale. It, I think so I think so ultimately I think the fact that we are able to bring good automation and data science to bear to create very high match quality is certainly helpful, but it's also very in a sense helpful that we are sort of that a lot of the recruiting is in some ways in the Stone Age. So the baseline that we are competing against is also somewhat low. So in a sense, both customers and developers are pleasantly surprised when a platform, given what their experiences have been so far with the recruiting ecosystem more generally.
Thank you, Vijay, for sharing that. I think it's very important for the audience to understand that baseline. Like, what does a traditional hiring timeline look like? What does a traditional process look like? And what does a Turing process look like, right? Are you able to, for example, cut down the hiring process from weeks to days, perhaps even minutes, right? Like, what is the efficiency sort of factors we're talking about? You mentioned that you have achieved a very high NPS score. You've mentioned you're able to automate at least 90% of the recruiting process. Let's talk about some of the efficiencies that your system is creating as the result of your process.
Yeah. So I think traditional recruiting tends to generally rely a great deal on I guess matching various resume keywords and throwing candidates at companies and hoping that some of them end up getting hired. Now, this leads, I would say, to a significant lose-lose kind of a value proposition on both the candidate side as well as on the company side. Like on the company side, often the average quality of candidates that come their way is a lot lower, which just means a much slower hiring process, maybe having to compromise on making hires that are less than ideal, and also the hiring process itself being relatively quite slow and time consuming. Like at Turing, our the conversion rate from like when Turing recommends a developer to a customer, a lot of customers like to do something like a half an hour to a 1 hour Zoom chat with the developer, and so more than 2/3 of the time the developer gets hired. This is of course much higher than anything you would have seen by way of an interview conversion rate. Like in a standard Silicon Valley on-site interview, you should expect between 10 to 20% of the candidates typically being made job offers. Then of course the candidate may not close. There is probably so ultimately going from an interview to successfully closing a candidate that you like, your conversion rates are often a lot closer to 5 to 10%. So we are at least I would say 10 times better than that. On the other hand, I would also say on the candidate side, again, there is a certain degree of redundancy. Like each company has a long vetting project. In some roles in the Silicon Valley, each company insists on their own take-home project as well. Like my wife is a data scientist, and when she was on the job market, each company would have their own 10-hour take-home project to send to her. And if you're interviewing at 10 companies, that starts to get a bit much. In a way, I think it is helpful that Turing factors out this part completely. It does a certain degree of common vetting, and beyond that, we have built enough trust with our customers that customers are perfectly happy to do this kind of sanity check, have this chat for a half an hour to an hour, discern the developer's interest, discern if there's enough of mutual interest and everything, and just go ahead with the hire. So ultimately, it just becomes a lot more efficient for both developer and customer alike.
I really appreciate you sharing sort of what the traditional process looks like and how Turing is improving on that existing sort of ingrained methodologies. I would like to learn more from you, Vijay, about the way that you are using data to create these sort of perfect matches, right? So you mentioned you're using various tests to collect data from the, let's say, the developer, designer, from the talent side, and you are analyzing that data and you're sort of selecting, hopefully, the best possible candidate for the position. At the same time, you're reviewing and scanning the applications that are being posted by the companies themselves. And sort of this would be sort of the second side of the coin, right? One side being that your developers are answering questions that are very specific, perhaps to the position or your process. And then on the other side, you have companies who are posting job ads and different types of job postings. And so the assumption is that you're able to find that best fit based on how good is that data you're collecting, right? Like, does the company explore fully in depth who it is that they're looking for, and does the developer answer the questions to such degree that you create a perfect match? So given that you have this a very complex problem, resume on one side, job sort of a job application on the other, how is technology helping you to create that match?
Yeah, great question, Slava. So I would say that today it is the fact that Turing is something like a full stack solution for hiring has been massively valuable to us, even from a data and an AI perspective. So the fact that we basically do sourcing, we do screening, we do matching, we also help make the collaboration itself more effective by way of a collaboration product that collects performance reviews and that collects other sorts of things after that even assesses whether there's enough time zone overlap between a developer and a customer. It also nudges developers to do virtual daily stand-ups and things of that sort. So because we have this nice end-to-end data, and we have now made hundreds of matches of developers with our customers. We have a lot of nice end-to-end data regarding what kind of test performances and what sorts of other developer profile attributes predict success with what kind of customer. Now, this is in sharp contrast to various companies that build tools for small pieces of the hiring process. For example, there are companies that allow you to administer programming tests, but they are a SaaS solution that only does programming tests. They are not thinking from first principles in terms of, if I had 1 hour with a developer or 5 hours with a developer, how do I run tests in the most efficient way to elicit the most valuable information, which can tell me in what kind of job they are likely to be most successful. They don't quite have that kind of end-to-end data, because we have this nice end-to-end data regarding what developers succeeded with what companies, what developers what were the small number of cases that did not, what were the cases where a developer was put in front of a customer and then the customer decided that this developer wouldn't quite be the fit for them at various stages too. Sometimes this can happen based on the person's resume and the person's other test performance itself we report to a customer. Sometimes it can happen after a conversation between the two of them. But this nice end-to-end, I would say, positive and negative training data, and as features, we have the developer profile itself, which I guess which is barely bootstrapped with the resume, which gets greatly enriched with all our test performance, and which even gets further enriched with the history of a developer on our platform. So when developers have worked with certain customers, successfully finished an engagement, and that gives us a lot of data as well regarding the kind of environments and the kind of jobs where they are likely to be most successful in future. So yeah, I would say ultimately having this end-to-end data allows us to make better matches, but it also allows us to improve our tests in a very, very significant way. We can kind of, like at some level, we think about our tests as a machine whose job is to generate maximum information gain per unit time. So one way we think about this is, okay, we have a certain prior probability of a developer being matchable to our customers, and with every minute of testing, can we move that probability close to 0 or close to 1 as rapidly as possible? Let's not waste their time. Let's not get them to do something for half an hour, which really doesn't tell us very much by way of actual predictive power. So yeah, so I think this end-to-end data has helped us in various ways with regard to using AI for bettering our tests itself, AI for building better profiles, AI for better matching, everything.
This is an amazing insights you're sharing with us, and it looks like we're getting positive feedback from the community. Maximilian on YouTube says thumbs up. Rael says hi Slava, great interview. This is definitely something that people are resonating with, which is that how you're leveraging technology, how you're solving a very complex problem. Let's talk a little bit more, Vijay, about the data that oftentimes companies are not considering directly when they're, let's sort of set the stage here. So imagine a company is looking to hire a developer, and that developer obviously must have technical skills to do his or her job, but sometimes you need a cultural fit, and this is where soft skills is one metric that we can evaluate from a recruiting perspective. But I'm also curious to know, where is Turing on the spectrum of creating a personality profile of that developer, right? So, a developer has a certain type of personality. There are many types of personalities that exist in this world. Oversimplification is that you have, by Myers-Briggs profile, I believe there's at least 16, if I'm not mistaken. There's a lot of different types of people that have unique personality traits, and one way to match those individuals to a company is to analyze their profile. So, again, coming back to the example of, you have a developer, imagine he has the technical skills, but now he has a specific personality, and ideally you would like to match that developer based on personality also. So where is Turing based on its ability to analyze the developer's personality?
Yeah, so we do have the Ocean Big Five personality test, which at least in the scientific literature is known to do slightly better than Myers-Briggs, to the best of my knowledge, in terms of predictive power. But I would say the ultimate. I think these personality tests are designed to make sort of predictions across the population, across the role, and things of that sort. So obviously, they are not likely to be as maximally valuable in the context of software developers alone, because ultimately, if you're trying to design one personality test for every role or every job or every function on this planet, that is not going to work as well as something which is a lot more narrowly geared toward this. I think in our case, I would say, it is obviously important. So particularly in the context of remote work, for example, there is no question that one needs to be an extremely proactive communicator, one who's even into over communication. It is very, very difficult to get remote work to function well without that. And that is also very, very closely connected to where you are, I guess, when it comes to levels. So Turing, in addition to evaluating your skills, also assesses what your level is. So, for example, are you an independent contributor? Are you something like a senior software engineer? Are you actually? And I'm not just going off of years of experience. I'm really going based on what your capability is. Are you a tech lead? Can you actually be counted on to make sure that this team with 3-4 other software engineers will be engaged in the most valuable activities? Can you unblock them? Can you talk with the business, and can you understand what is important from a business and product perspective? Also, propose good trade-offs, take that sort of ownership. So these things do start coming up very, very significantly. So I would say yes, when it comes to raw personality, obviously, yeah, higher on extroversion, higher on openness is certainly massively helpful. But I think a lot of specifics with regard to your maturity, if you will, which is what we measure in our seniority tests, becomes massively valuable, because that gives you a sense of what is the sort of environment this person will succeed in. There are certain companies which have extremely strong tech leads, and everybody, the one area they are lacking in is these independent contributor engineers. There are other companies which which are not quite as mature, and need a much greater degree of people that can function autonomously, that can work with vague business and product priorities, and still build something that is valuable. So yes, this turns out to be very, very valuable. In fact, um, I can't say that we have yet gotten into some kind of a holy grail of an ultimate ML based ranking function, but our let's say semi hand tuned, semi ML based ranking function, effectively what we see from it is that ultimately, to be an effective software developer in this remote context, it is not like being a good chess player. Like, if you want to be a world class chess player, it is sufficient to be good at this one thing. You reach the 99.99th percentile in this one area, and you don't need to be anything. I mean, you could yeah, you could be like a Bobby Fischer. You could be a person who cannot get along with anybody else, and still perhaps do well in that context. To be an effective software developer, there's no question that it ends up becoming something like a diminishing returns curve. And for each job, the exact shape of the curve will vary. Like, for example, you need to be reasonably good when it comes to computer science fundamentals, reasonably good when it comes to data structures, fairly good when it comes to communication and other things, fairly good when it comes to your tech stack, and you start hitting a point of diminishing returns beyond a point. Beyond a point, it is not necessarily as helpful if you're the very best in that one area. At that point, it becomes a lot more important that you don't have any fatal weaknesses. For example, if you're good across a number of these things, but you're a terrible communicator, it doesn't matter how good you are in the other areas. This one fatal weakness will get you to fail. Or yeah, you're terrible at this particular tech stack, or you're terrible as a raw programmer, even though you have enough conceptual knowledge, that will get you to fail. If you don't have the maturity to sort of understand what is important and how to properly collaborate with people, that again will get you to fail. So it's interesting that in a sense, for virtually every software developer role, it becomes important to that you as a software developer be pretty good at something like 5 things simultaneously, and not have fatal weaknesses in something that is vital to the role.
Absolutely. The area of strength is what oftentimes people focus on, right? Using your strengths to get hired, and knowing that you have a weakness, recognizing you have a weakness, oftentimes is empowering, because it allows you to improve into perhaps an application. It allows you to improve your chances of success. So let's talk about the context of when you have a developer and they're lacking perhaps in one or two areas of their particular profile. How is Turing able to perhaps guide them? How is Turing able to help them? How is Turing able to perhaps point out that, hey, perhaps you need to improve on your English skills, perhaps you need to improve on your resume, perhaps you need to tailor your message so that it better resonates with a potential organization. So is there a way that Turing provides insights to the developers who need guidance to improve on their weakness?
Yes, we do. In fact, I would say this falls into sort of two buckets. I would say there's one bucket of a person that maybe needs a little bit of help, but with a minor amount of help is potentially matchable to our customer right now. So one common use case at Turing is, say, somebody that's maybe not as good at maybe that's a reasonably good communicator, not a terrible one, but perhaps not very good at talking about their work, their past work in a clear and impressive enough manner, perhaps not as good at presenting themselves in the context of a resume and everything. So when developers do pretty well in our tests, and we are pretty convinced that, okay, there's this this with a modest amount of effort, we can easily make this developer presentable, and we are quite confident that this person has what it takes to be able to succeed with one of our partner companies. We do help them with that. So yes, we have a team that does exactly these sorts of things. There are, however, of course, developers that are sufficiently far away from the mark in a few of these different areas, and it would not be possible for us to match them with the customer just yet. It would maybe they would at least have to work on it for a few months or maybe a year. In those cases, we give them exactly the kind of feedback you're talking about. So we may recommend to them that they practice more the algorithms, data structures type problems on lead code, or we may practice that we may suggest that they get better with their English, or we may on certain occasions, for example, there may be developers that are strong, but maybe whose skills are largely in some kind of an outdated technology that there's not as much demand for. So in those cases, of course, we may strongly recommend that they certain similar technologies that are very much in line with their expertise, but which the market wants today, that they may want to spend some time beefing up those areas. So yes, we do give developers all this feedback.
This is really empowering, especially for developers that are starting out, especially for developers that do not see that weakness in their profile. They do need guidance, they do need help. So I'm glad to hear that Turing is guiding developers and others who are interested to get hired. Let's talk a little bit more, Vijay, about Covet. Covet has drastically changed how companies have started to think about recruiting. A lot of companies, especially in 2020, have decided to close physical locations of their offices, and that has led to lots of different reframing and rethinking of their processes. So let's discuss how Covet has impacted global companies when it comes to recruiting.
Yeah, there is no question at all that I think even prior to COVID, Turing was growing purely on account of the raw use case to do with talent shortage and the opportunity and the overall value proposition. But COVID certainly has changed a lot more minds and sort of accelerated many companies. Accelerated the speed at which they change their minds. I think without COVID, I think companies would have done what they did in 1 year over maybe a period of 4 or 5 years, but just because of market pressures when it comes to the best talent. But of course, COVID has forced them in this direction a lot sooner. I would say that certainly, for example, pre-COVID, we'd be able to get somewhat mid-sized companies, smaller and mid-sized companies, being a lot more willing to work with Turing. But these large companies with their large bureaucracies and everything, they were often more resistant. Now, of course, and by far, I think the biggest objection we would get from a lot of people is that I like everything about what you guys are doing. I like the fact that you're finding me high quality developers that are just right for me. The one thing I do not like is remote. I want the engineer sitting next to me. And the point is certainly that COVID has certainly made that impossible for people, and consequently has made them more open to the idea of this thing, looking in other locations. Even when it comes to developers, I would say there has been some impact in this direction. Like, for example, in certain countries where let's say there was not much by way of tech opportunities. Of course, Turing had enormous traction even prior to COVID. In countries with maybe reasonably good local opportunities, again, Turing has gotten a lot of traction. Like earlier, I would hear sales objections from developers saying, I like the idea of remote. I like this flexibility. I like the idea that the fact that I can sort of live anywhere and be plugged into the best opportunities. But remote kind of feels lonely. Remote feels it feels very weird. I mean, what will my family say? All my friends are going to work while while I'm just working from home. It seems like I'm goofing off, whatever. So I think I want to say that it has kind of accelerated this changing of minds even on the developer side. I think a lot of developers too, even normal work has become exactly remote work. So now from their perspective, again, from their perspective, if they are working for a local company but remotely versus working for a US company and remotely, well, what is not to like about this value proposition?
Yeah, I think that being open to remote work and now being, in a way, forced into remote work has created a very unique opportunity to use companies like Turing, to use companies that are leveraging vast amount of data to better match candidates. Because ultimately, you want to find the best possible talent. Well, if that talent is not next to you, then you have to look outside of your geography, your city, and you have to open your mind. And with Covet, hopefully that most companies, if not all, are now being more open to that idea and being more considerate to using remote talent to hire people from around the world. And the only thing that they must learn to juggle in their minds at this point is the time zones, which becomes the hardest part about working with remote workers. You're managing somebody who perhaps is on a different time zone. So let's talk about, what do you see as sort of the best practice for companies? Let's say you have a North American company, and let's say they've raised $20-30 million, and they do want to run as fast as possible. They want to scale as fast as possible. What would be a sort of a best practice for them? Do you offer any recommendations for organizations who are looking to hire?
Yes. So on the Turing platform, we have a requirement from all our developers that they be comfortable overlapping with 4 hours of a normal customer's workday, and they be kind of comfortable with it. It should not be something which is stretching them outside their comfort zone, because that if it is too much outside their comfort zone, it is not something they would be comfortable sustaining for a long period of time. Fortunately, I think there are enough software developers that are like night owls that are willing to change their schedule around to basically overlap with something like morning Pacific time, or morning some other US time zone, which practically means for developers in various countries it's of course a lot easier for developers in Latin America, but for, let's say, for developers in Africa and Eastern Europe, Asia and everything, it means being willing to do a few hours in the night to overlap with that time zone. For us, approximately seems like a nice sweet spot between giving developers enough time to sort of do their own thing as well. I mean, there's probably not as much benefit to going from 4 to 8, but if one were to go from like 4 to 1 or 4 to 2, this is a sort of situation where significant amount of misalignment happens. A lot of work, there's not enough opportunity for a lot of casual conversations. It is difficult to do everything in a planned, structured, planned ahead of time type of meeting. Like the reason in office work is sort of productive, and it is the fact that a lot of casual conversations happen as well, which go on to become valuable ideas. And this nice 4 hours of time zone overlap ends up giving enough time for that kind of unstructured discussion as well. And so in our experience, this is how we run things even at our internal team at Turing. We have our leadership here in Palo Alto, but for most part, a big chunk of our team is remote distributed all over the world. At least 90% of it is. And the one simple protocol that works well is these coordination hours are morning Pacific time. That's it. Now, of course, there's it is true that there are some percentage of developers that are absolutely uncomfortable going outside of working outside of, let's say, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. in their time zone in Asia and everything. In those situations, at least today, we don't see any easy solution, because I think by far the biggest challenge with remote is to make sure that work translates to value at roughly the same rate that it would translate in a non-remote setting. Traditionally, I have seen many people complain saying, well, it was hard to find enough of a time zone overlap. Consequently, the developers tended to go off on their own tangent. They didn't understand the bigger business context. yes, yes, I could get good quality developers and I could hire them at reasonable salaries as well. But ultimately, the value they produce was very little. It would have been a lot simpler if I replaced these 3 remote developers with one developer sitting in my office. So though those sorts of complaints tend to happen. So yeah, I think by far time zone is a very important fix to this problem.
One of the trends, Vijay, that I notice in all industries, not just in recruiting, is the use of videos to better understand the world, to better understand, in this case, an individual. And I have seen already companies who start to use video to analyze interviews and analyze different parts of, let's say, the matchmaking process. So perhaps a video would be recorded of a developer, and the video the questionnaire would ask the developer, hey, please describe your current goal and what you want to accomplish in the future. Where do you see yourself 5 to 10 years from now? And the software would analyze the video. It would scan for different elements that were useful to the software that was creating this particular deep learning model. And we see more and more companies start to use computer vision. We see more and more companies start to use deep learning to analyze video data specifically. I'm curious, where is Turing on this vision of using video data to better understand both candidates and companies?
So it's a great question. Obviously, it is something we have we have played around with a great deal in the last year or two. One thing we like to constantly sort of calculate in our mind is how valuable a signal are we getting out of something, and how much effort does it take to get it right? How much time of a candidate are we taking up? I mean, we try to make sure ultimately we end up getting a very good ratio. I think today the difficulty is something like this, that in theory, I think this holds a lot of promise. So it certainly holds a certain degree of promise for example, for assessing raw English fluency for sure. I think that certainly should be possible to assess somewhat automatically. Though to be fair, again, various things in an assessment process end up sort of correlating with various other things. So one needs to then assess what the conditional information gain is. For example, conditioned on a person's written skill being it is, for example, much simpler to administer tests where you're testing a developer's reading comprehension. It's also a lot easier to do a test where you're doing listening comprehension, where the developer listens to something and answers questions. I mean, no AI required. Then the question becomes one of how much extra information are you getting on top of that? Because obviously these things tend to be correlated with one another too. So, and I guess I can imagine us getting some signal in that direction, but I mean, we don't like to waste a developer's time too much either to something which gives only marginal signal. One of the more complicated things, I would say, which is probably the most valuable, but also harder to, at least a little bit harder to do by way of any kind of plug and play AI, is assessing, I guess, assessing the notion of how effective a technical conversation can I have with this person. So here is a sort of thing where I would maybe want to know about a developer's past work. Why was it valuable? Ask some pointed questions to get a hang of how does this person sort of know what they are doing. Do they ultimately seem like a person who's on top of a specific area? Now, in this pure video recorded format, where there's a fixed set of questions, a candidate gets to record responses, and we analyze that, it doesn't quite it doesn't quite replace this kind of conversation very well. And yeah, from our perspective, it's a matter of what does our funnel look like really. Like if there's a particular step in our process where let's say 20% of people are likely to fail that particular step, and this step can be automated, that is something we may think about. If it is the sort of thing where, well, we no more than 5% of people are going to fail that step, and a lot deeper signal needs to be obtained manually anyway, this is the sort of thing we have deprioritized optimizing. And plus, of course, there's also the angle with a lot of these various things. You don't want to run this like a knockout tournament, so you want to think about all information as a whole, ideally, because each of these things can make mistakes. So you don't want to have knocked out a developer from consideration completely. You want to, yeah. So I would say this is doable. It is something we have played around with. It is not something we have seen right on top when it comes to this information gain per unit time.
Yeah, it's an interesting area to explore, absolutely, and it's great to hear you guys have at least considered this idea. I see a very unique use case of leveraging video to better match individuals who are doing more on the sales or the marketing side, less on the development. But at the same time, if you have somebody who is clear in communication, you can pick that up through an English proficiency test, and whether it's written or verbal, I think either way you're collecting enough data to catch that signal. So it's great that you guys already use soft skill tests and both technical skill tests to catch both sides of the spectrum, the development side and the sales side. Let's talk more about Turing and where you guys are going. It's great to hear you guys have recently raised capital in 2020. It's great to hear that you guys are scaling on all fronts. It's great to hear you guys are working with more companies, more developers, more talent. Let's talk about the future, right? Where is Turing going? What does that future look like?
Okay. I mean, we think the market and the opportunity is really large, just because I think there are something like 30 million software developers in the world today, roughly, and at least about half of them are outside of US, Western Europe, and those sorts of places with that are very good with job opportunities. And I would say there are at least a million developers in the world, I would say, that deserve to be working at I would say at a strong US company today, which is a really large pool of developers to work with. So yeah, I think at Turing, we wish to grow as rapidly as we possibly can. I think the market is enormous if we are able to effectively, I would say, engage a big chunk of the available developers in the world in such remote opportunities. Then yeah, the market size is enormous. A company that cracks this will become as big as an Apple or a Google. So from our standpoint, really, the question is, how fast can we? I mean, we have had rapid growth in the last year, but of course things are much easier off of a smaller base. But from our perspective, we are hoping this capital will allow us to maintain rapid growth rates where year on year, even though we are larger and we face other scaling challenges at various points.
It's always great to hear the founder's vision for the future and sort of how you leverage, in your case, code, media, and capital to scale that. I am also curious to talk to you, Vijay, about the untapped market that exists that oftentimes is not visible by either organizations or the talent. And that tapped market is companies who are looking, but they're not advertising yet, or vice versa. It's developers who are interested to be hired, but they're not making an explicit statement that says, hey, check out my resume, look at me as an individual for hire. So you have a potential, an opportunity to tap into what's considered sort of indirect or not explicit data, and you're doing your best to figure out which company is about to hire, which individual is more likely to take on side projects, which developer is interested for side gigs. So from this sort of unseen marketplace, is Turing using technology? Is Turing tapping into this unforeseen sort of marketplace?
Yes, obviously there are various pieces of data where we crawl and analyze and everything to make these kinds of judgments. Though one minor correction in terms of what we do on the developer side. So we do not really do gigs and side projects. We are basically we only do full-time jobs generally, and we made a conscious decision to go in this direction, just because we like to think a little bit from first principles in terms of where does the most um, uh, what is the amount of value ultimately created in the world in by software developers working full-time jobs versus gigs. There's no question that the ratio is at least 100 is to 1. So ultimately, it is a lot more valuable to developers when Turing offers full-time jobs and nice career growth opportunities, the likes of which would have only been available to their counterparts in the Silicon Valley as a result of working on specific projects and collaborating with specific people. And on the company side, again, we most of the valuable companies with large enough budgets building cool enough things are generally not as interested in hiring sort of developers for a short term for gigs and everything. There may be a lot of projects that are barely funded that are getting off the ground, which may be doing that. But again, those kind of customers are not as interesting to us. Now, when it comes to trying to assess what you are talking about, yeah, I think yes, when it comes to companies, I think we go and crawl a lot of the same kind of data that various people would try to crawl. We try to get information regarding who got funded, who appears to be growing, and various things. We have a lot of internal data engineering and data science efforts in that direction. For developers, again, it is the same thing. We do various things to reach out to developers in different parts of the world. We scrape data, we run ads, we do a lot of things to get a sufficiently wide reach. Because one of the things we've learned when it comes to software developers is the world is like constantly changing. New cities and new countries keep surprising us all the time. Like the same country which didn't have much software talent 3-4 years back suddenly appears to have a lot of it. And I think internet penetration, MOOCs, and all sorts of learning resources has certainly leveled the playing field a lot more than the past. I think this has meant that the most motivated and intelligent developers in various parts of the world have been able to develop a lot of skills by no matter where they've lived. So we've always wanted to make sure we get in front of those developers and uh, so that yeah, they learn about us and they give us a chance to help them.
Yes, it's definitely something that you guys you're helping to fill a market gap between people who are interested to get hired and people who are interested to hire. And my question to you, Vijay, is where is Turing in terms of its technology, right? And would you consider your platform to be sort of still in the early stages, sort of data gathering? Do you see yourself more as a mature company where you're now looking to optimize technologies for a specific metric? Let's talk more about the technology.
Yeah, it's a good question. So compared to I think where we wish to be, I would say in many ways I would still consider ourselves early. I mean, really, prior to us, prior to us becoming a $50 billion company or a $100 billion company, I doubt I would consider us mature. Just because I think the market and the opportunity is really large. I think we are significantly ahead of other companies in the recruiting space. But I think again, I think it is relatively easy to be ahead of where other companies are, just because I think the baseline is very low and this industry has generally done things very manually and hasn't really brought so much automation and technology to bear. But yeah, I think compared to the size of the opportunity, the kinds of signals we can collect, the improvements when it comes to data science, the improvements when it comes to matching and so many other things, I would still say we are something like early to mid stage. Really, nothing I would call mature. But what is very attractive is that in a market like this, even in some way, in some sense, I would say even early customers have even been delighted with our early versions of our offering, and with every sort of updated version, they are happier and happier with it, both customers and developers alike. And that is always an attractive place to be. In fact, I still remember with some very early versions of our technology that we were quite embarrassed by. Both customers and developers were still quite happy with that, just because it was still much better than anything they had seen. So I think, yeah, solving a very important problem where the world today doesn't seem to have very good solutions. That is a good place to be. Even nice, promising early attempts takes you a long distance. The market is a lot more forgiving and everything else.
Sounds great. This definitely lays the foundation of where you are today. So we have about 5 minutes left on the interview, and what I would like to do is conclude with one question, and then I'll just highlight a few comments that I noticed on the social media channels. And the question is, where do you want to take Turing in the future in terms of technology, right? You already have a very unique set of technologies you leverage. You already use technologies like machine learning, data science. So where do you want to take Turing next? Like, what does that technology vision look like?
Yeah, in many ways, I would say it is still early versions of our machine learning and data science at work, I would say. And we have had this nice, I guess, virtuous feedback loop as we have had more and more developers going through our platform, and as we have done more and more successful matches of developers with customers, we have our AI and machine learning has had a lot more data to work with as well, which in turn has allowed us to allowed us to refine our AI to do better matching, and to even improve our tests, which in turn improves our data collection itself in the first place. So I guess we have there are enormous scale and efficiencies I think we can bring to bear in this industry. I mean, no, there's no theoretical reason why we cannot grow 1000x compared to where we are today, and that would really be world changing in many important ways. And if we can get there, not only would we have changed hundreds of thousands of developers' lives immeasurably for the better, we would have also fundamentally, I think, accelerated the pace of technology itself in the world. Today, I do think one of the biggest blockers to the rate of technology advance itself is this talent that can actually help build that technology. If we have suddenly made accessible a whole lot of additional talented people, I think that can help the future of technology and Silicon Valley itself scale to a much greater extent than it could have possibly with the status quo.
Great. I really appreciate you coming on, Vijay. I want to highlight a few comments on our live stream to give focus to the audience that did join. Thank you, everyone, for joining, for listening. I have a comment from Yulia on YouTube. She writes, Привет, Slava. That's, for those who are not familiar with Russian, that means hi, Slava. And then she also wrote, Спасибо, было очень интересно. That means thank you. It was a very interesting interview. I also have another comment from, let me just highlight here, from Maxim, also YouTube joins as well, written in Russian. He wrote, Интересная информация, спасибо. This means excellent interview. Thank you very much. It's great to hear that we see international talent who speak multiple languages and they're able to join us for this interview. I really appreciate everyone who did post a comment and everyone who did join this interview. As a small reminder, if you have missed any part of this live stream, feel free to rewind. This is something that allows you to watch over and over and get insights about Vijay, get insights about Turing. I remind everyone about myself personally, for those who are not familiar. My name is Slava. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Produvia. And just to sort of emphasize what I do, I help companies around the world to use modern technologies. Oftentimes we develop artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science type of projects. And we partner with companies around the world to leverage these technologies to solve real business problems. One quick example is, companies who are looking to generate revenue, reduce costs, and save time. So I conclude this interview with a link for both Turing. If you want to learn more about Turing, check out turing.com. That's Turing.com, Turing.com. And then if you want to learn more about Produvia, check out Produvia.com. That's Produvia.com. I want to thank Vijay for coming on. It's been great chatting with you, Vijay, and I really appreciate you sharing your insights and helping companies and developers and talent around the world to be matched.
Thanks, Slava. I greatly enjoyed our conversation. Good luck.
Great. And that concludes our interview. Feel free to join us next week, where we have a scheduled interview with a company who is looking to raise global consciousness with modern technologies to elevate stress and reduce worries. Next week, I interview with the founders of ConsciousOS. I'm super excited for this as well. I want to thank everyone for joining. And as always, subscribe for those who are interested to learn more about these upcoming live streams, where you can learn from the world's best companies as they scale their business, as they scale their technologies. Vijay was very kind with us to share how he and his team has scaled recruiting problems around the world. And I'm super excited to keep up to date with Turing. Again, check out turing.com to learn more. And I want to thank everyone for their time. Thanks again. Have a great day.